Well, it's not morning. It's just gone noon and we're out for a walk on a Sunday, where we live again, not in Spain, in Orton in West Lancashire. And we're not too sure where we're going to go. We're heading roughly toward the Canal, but my intention is to just do a short sort of little whiz around here to show you a little bit, and I'm going to say a few thoughts about after the Camino and generally how I think it's quite difficult for a lot of people, particularly if you do it all in one go, but for us how it's been and just ideas I've had since really. So that's to come up. The giraffe is something of a star in Orton. It's currently kitted out for Wimbledon. It's got grass around it, it's got rackets with tennis balls around its chest area, a sun visor. I noticed that there's an Orton Facebook page and it gets a mention there every so often. The bronze statues are, I believe, made in Kenya, and there's an old, well, there was a car dealership in Ormskirk, which is now the place where they've turned it into a big sales room for these bronze statues that are made in Kenya. I think they're from Kenya. And they cost an arm and a leg. They all of a sudden started appearing. I don't know whether initially people got good deals on them. There were more giraffes up on one of the hills that they painted gold. Looking over toward Winter Hill over that way, which is further inland. That's sort of heading to the east of where we are. And then this is actually Gauze Hill that we're on. If I were to walk a little more to my left and then go down that road, which those trees are on, that leads down onto a viewpoint. I don't know whether you'll be able to see. I'll zoom in on it for you. Way over there in the distance, you can see the docks in Liverpool. They look like giraffes, I think. The giant red cranes. And behind them are the Welsh mountains. You can see them from lots of places around here. This isn't really the best view of them. But anyway, we're heading down here. Quite often we end up coming back this way, but we're going to walk in this direction on the way to wherever we end up today. You can hear a yellowhammer. One of the things today that I don't usually encounter walking around here is, I think because a lot of these crops are kind of maturing now. It seems to be the oat in particular. The tiny little cornflowers, you know, the little tiny black ones, they're like little dashers that you get all over you. They're out in force today, and I think because I've come dressed as a flower, they really, really like me. Earlier on I had them just, I looked down and I was covered in them, and I put sun cream on earlier today, so they stuck to it. That's looking to where we came. I haven't forgotten, by the way, that I will be mentioning more about the Camino, but I want to find a nice sheltered spot where I can sit down to talk properly and have a packet of crisps while I'm at it, actually. You know, looking at this, it makes me think about my little rant toward the end of my time on the Camino. Over there, on the left, we have a field of oats. We've been walking past many fields of such like crops today. And here we have a mammoth field of slightly funky looking purpley kind of cabbages. Oh, they're cabbages, or are they cauliflowers? Cabbages, yeah, they are just cabbages. But I was saying that we don't grow food. Well, we sort of do. I mean, it is a prime agricultural area. It's particularly the field next to where I live, where they keep growing grass, and they have for about 10 years, and they just store the grass as hay, obviously. Wrap it up in... They've got a funky plastic wrapping machine which sort of whizzes around and wraps each bale up. Makes a heck of a din. It's quite a cool thing, actually. Historically, it was like grade A agricultural land, but they keep kind of depriving it of nutrients by just planting the same thing over and over. It strengthens their argument to build on it. It's a rural area. And it's not really heaving with people. We don't really have much of a population problem here. But it will be what it will be. So this is the Leeds to Liverpool Canal. And the first longboat you can see there says on it the wool boat, which is apparently open. That's a relatively new thing. I haven't really investigated it much. They sell things that are made of wool. And there's a statue down there to the first navvy man. It was here that they first started digging the Leeds to Liverpool Canal. Obviously it runs all the way from Leeds to Liverpool. It was very important during the industrial period. And this is looking over to the Saracen's Head. We may come and stop here later for a drink and perhaps some chips, maybe meet up with people, we'll see. But it's a really nice spot, and you can walk along it all the way, actually. We quite often do the walk just down the canal.
Could be interesting, this.
One of my peaches has leaked. Well, we've decided we're going to walk along the canal a little way. We could have continued to the right here. I'm just showing you the sculpture of the navvy man there. Yeah, we could have continued into the village of Halsall there, which is now off to the left, actually. And there's a nice route that we sometimes do which takes you off across the moss, and you can see lots of birds that way. But it's such a nice day for being near to the water. We thought we'd continue along here. He's still making use of that picture this app. The bird swimming back and forth, I just showed you a moment ago, is a coot, of course. Bald as a coot. We were talking about how easy it is to remember. We get moorhens here as well, and I know some people find it a little hard to distinguish between the two. There's a very large dragonfly here. So I said I would record a few of my thoughts about having finished the section that we've been doing of the Camino. And there are sort of two categories that what I want to say fall into. One thing is the actual process of having done just a section, I mean quite a long section. We walked just under 300 miles, not including the extra bits of walking that you tend to do at the end of each day. But the other thing I want to cover as well is what I'm thinking I'll be doing with these videos and when I'll return to the Camino, so that you know what to expect, if indeed anything, from what I'm doing with this YouTube channel. I'd also be really keen to hear what you would like me to cover, if indeed anything. So, returning from the Camino, well, as you see, I've been posting up day by day the sections between Belorado and Sarria that we walked recently, and I know at least one person has asked me to cover the equipment that I was using, so I will talk about that in a separate post. But it was odd because, as you might have seen, when we got to Sarria, we'd been talking about in a way that felt final for us, and I think because of the type of Camino that we were doing, we were really thinking about that period of, I mean, for me it's important that it's a physical thing as well, because I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and there are various physical issues to do with that. So for me it's liberating to be able to be physically doing something and finding out how my body works in a way, and what I can do and what I can't do, and just confronting those things, and it helps me build confidence. But also just being out in nature and being immersed in a culture. For me, I really enjoy speaking Spanish, and at least trying to improve my Spanish. And by the end of being there, I listened to some of the early videos on my Spanish, because I speak to people in Spain every week. You know, just having conversations to keep my Spanish up and to try and improve it too. And at the start I just shudder to hear my accent at times, because I sound really English, and then toward the end, when I came home, people were saying, you know, your accent is a lot better now. So that was really, really nice. But the process, yeah, as you heard, we got to Sarria and we're thinking, in a way it feels as though we've finished, because for us, getting to the cathedral at Santiago de Compostela isn't the be all and end all. And yet, I'm hoping you're not getting too much sound from the grasses that are just around the side of the microphone here, but if you are, it's nature. And then basically what we planned is we're going to return next year, in the June of next year, in 2023, and we'll walk from Sarria to Finisterre, and then also to Murcia. So it will be quite a long walk. We'll stop for 2 days in Santiago de Compostela. So we'll be finishing the Camino Frances then. And it's strange because for me, because I've been processing the videos and I've been going through everything again, and I've been looking at them again myself, and also looking at some from the first sections too. It feels quite strange, because I think Galicia already started to seem very different, quite English in some ways, which previously I've been saying it's a bit like Scotland, it's a bit like Wales, quite often it's a bit like Wales. And Galicia started to feel more like England. And I love walking in England, I love walking in Scotland, I love walking in Wales, I think they're fantastic, but the Camino de Santiago is a completely different thing, because it's a special place. If you've been, I'm sure you know. The culture, the support network, the system of just walking A to B to C. I mean, the Thru-hike system is so well in place. But here, I found myself thinking, well, could I do a Thru-hike just in the UK? And I probably could, but I think, certainly as a woman, I would feel a bit more vulnerable doing that here than I would there, I think. But that's partly because it isn't really set up for that. There are, of course, routes that you can do, like the Dales Way, which we've done, or the West Highland Way, or whatever, and it's all very, you know, there are things in place, but not quite with the little coffee shops and things along the way, and the yellow arrows everywhere, and everybody rooting you on, and the communal spirit. And then behind all of that, the history, the knowledge that some things have changed, but some things are the same, and people have been doing this. And then if you have any kind of religious aspect or a spiritual aspect, there's that as well. And I think for me, I mean, just walking around here, you may have seen, I still see the birds excite me, dragonflies excite me, and so on, but you do get used to what you see in your area. So being in a new place, there's an intense learning process too. I don't see black kites here, for example. We don't really get red kites in this area, but we would in Wales. So all of that, and I kind of came home feeling quite settled into the idea of going back next year. Now I need to write about it. I need to figure out what exactly I want to say, because I do have things I'm focusing on in my writing. In particular, the idea about carrying, and metaphorically as well as physically, because of course I have physical restrictions to how much I can carry. But also pasts that we carry, problems that we carry, difficulties, questions that we carry. And it's strange. Andrew knows I'm feeling quite unsettled about it at the moment, and I don't know quite what I'm going to do about this. Because in some ways I felt that while I was there, every time I tried to think of those things, it was almost as though my mind was just full of all of this wonderful stuff. There wasn't any kind of problem, which sounds silly, but if you go there thinking that you'll gain clarity, and then when you go you just feel completely happy, except for twinges and so on. And maybe that's a good thing, I don't know, but I also felt sort of empty of the need to think, and that now that I'm home I'm feeling a little as though I need the space to think. But as you heard, while we were walking, we were quite concerned with time quite a lot, so maybe there was that as well, that I was just thinking about what we were doing a lot, and I almost want to go back and do it, maybe not staying in private rooms, maybe staying in albergues, and part of me is considering quite soon going back, and I don't know whether I'll do this, maybe on my own. Andrew can't do that, so we're talking about it at the moment, and I won't do anything rash, but I am considering, because I'm writing about it, possibly returning and doing some of it on my own and staying in albergues, even though I'd have to take that sleep setup. And whether there would be any point in doing that, or whether it would be better to just write about what I've got so far. It feels almost as though somehow the story isn't complete, and I don't know that going and just doing those final 5 days to Sarria, it will feel... But then I want to go and do the Via della Plata, I want to do the Camino del Norte, I want to do the Primitivo, I'd like to do the Obidato. And Andrew can't do a lot of these because of the type of job he has, whereas I have the freedom to, because I do freelance work as well, but because I'm focusing on this writing. So I think for a lot of people it's an unsettling experience coming home, and last time, although we did a slightly shorter section, we were away for quite a long time last time when we did Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Belorado. And we stayed in Barcelona at the start and end for quite a few days and had an extra night in Pamplona too. And that time I came home and just felt quite low for quite a long time, and I thought, this isn't how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to feel better. I'm quite envious of people that can do it all in one go, because I think it must be incredible. But I also think that what we've been doing is incredible in a different way, because we've had just such an amazing time, and I've loved the company of having Andrew with me. I don't know that I would actually enjoy it in the same way on my own. But I also don't want it to be just an easy thing. Anyway, so if you've got thoughts about that, whatever you experienced, I'd really like to know about it. It's something I'm finding quite hard in some ways at the moment, and don't know that I should be. Anyway, and maybe I need to just get a tent and start wild camping all the time. I don't know what I'll do. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing I was going to say, my intention had been with this YouTube channel to post little videos, because I have been taking my video camera out and about with me when I walk around here, just practicing, particularly with the new microphone, and for my own notes, which, you know, that's often how I record, like the things that have happened for the purpose of my writing, because you can immediately record it and you can show it and you can go back to it. So, and actually uploading things to YouTube is a perfect way of then storing it, so you don't have to use computer space. So that's how I started out doing this, in a way. And I'm just addicted to taking photographs and to filming. But actually, one thing is that since I've come back, I have found going back through some of the footage and making sure it's good quality. It's been very, very time consuming. But my idea is to start showing little walks around here, but maybe also to talk a little bit about equipment and gear. Those of you that saw some of my posts on the Camino forum, the Camino de Santiago.me, M-E, forum, I posted a thread ages ago about the problems I'd had with finding footwear because of my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and the sciatic pain, which you may have seen was a problem with these last sections that we did. It's strange because I had extreme foot pain to the point where for 4 months I couldn't walk, and they thought I'd broken both my feet. This was a consultant at the hospital here, and they put me in plastic walker boots for, you know, the type you have when you fractured your feet. And so I couldn't walk for the best part of 4 months, and I think I've talked about this before, but I hit upon Hoka shoes as being really helpful for getting me walking, but they were the Stinson shoes, which Andrew uses now. For me, they weren't ideal for longer periods because I need a bit more cushioning. It ended up, I mean, it is a problem with a trapped nerve that I get. It's like the sciatic nerve. It's near to that area. I don't think it is actually the sciatic nerve. It's one of the other nerves nearby, but it's the same basic thing. And it gets trapped when I've been carrying a backpack, or I've been if my muscles basically in my bum, my glutes aren't strong enough and my hamstrings aren't strong enough. But the pain, I can feel it a little bit there, but it's not really back pain the way people typically think of sciatica being. It's more that it sends the pain down to the end of the nerve, which is in my foot. And what I found is that if I don't have enough cushioning and bounce in the shoes, it's not absorbing the shock, so it sends the problem up to my back. And that's when I get an even worse problem, particularly if the muscles aren't in place. But that shock absorption is really important. So basically, I ended up, during lockdown, because we couldn't go into shops, I ordered so many shoes and just tried them out in my house, walking back and forth and back and forth. Then I had a similar problem with backpacks, trying to get backpacks that worked. Everything I choose has to be like thoroughly investigated. I have to look at the weight of it, I have to look at the systems. My backpack is an expensive backpack, which is frustrating in a way. It was a gift from Andrew, for which I'm very grateful. But I can't just buy what I like. I have to be really, really cautious with things like that. And then other little things like my gaiters. I wear Dirty Girl gaiters, which are only available in America now. They used to be available through a shop here, but they've stopped selling them, so now I can't get them. So little things like that, but there are so many pieces of equipment. I'm thinking maybe I'll just post little bits about those sorts of things, as well as the walks around here. And indeed, we're hoping to go a bit further afield, about once a month or so. It's difficult at the moment because of the cost of fuel and also being aware of the environment. We do a lot of walks from our front door here. But always, we're always finding something new. We always take slightly different routes, or, if the weather's changed, it's always a little different. So I'm thinking alongside that, maybe little bits about things that are interesting me at the moment. Bits of equipment, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But if you've got any ideas for anything that you would like to know more about that I've been talking about, or just in general, any requests, I'd be really keen to hear. I've thoroughly enjoyed the responses that you've been giving me on the various different videos. Please keep them up. It's really nice to be in touch with people. So, thank you. Yeah, so you might have just seen the tail end of, I don't know whether it was the red arrows, maybe it was the red, they didn't look very red, but they were planes in formation. That is because we're very near to Southport here, and it's the Southport Air Show today, so we may actually see, we had a Lancaster bomber flying over the back garden pretty much yesterday. And yeah, sometimes we get the red arrows coming over, like the Blue Angels in the US, I believe. And all sorts of strange aeroplanes that might be flying over today. It's over 2 days, and it's a massive thing. So I think they may indeed be the red arrows. They're doing a bit of a display. They're really low over the beach there. They're just going behind those trees. They're going to come out next to that house. There they go. I'm going to do a loop-the-loop. I think they might do a loop-the-loop. They're going up.
That's quite funny when you see
Boat just sliding past.
Yeah.
We're going to walk down the canal a little further. We were sitting just down there in that field, just at the side. And I think it must have been the red arrows, came from sort of, you see where my finger is, over that direction. They flew over here and will have been going up and down the coastline by Southport. I went once and sat, there's a sort of promenade there, and the kind of concrete sloped areas down to the beach. It's a very broad beach, you know, the sand goes a long way out. It's very wet sand there, actually. Slightly further down at Formby, it's a much sort of drier sand in a way in places. Oh, dragonfly just in front of me. We do sometimes walk to Formby. Yeah, it's a good walk to the beach and back. It's about 23 miles, so I was trying to work out earlier what that would be in kilometres. It's about 36, I think. So this is the Scaresbrick Marina. All long boats. And then here people have cabins. Or indeed caravans. And we've come from down there. One of the other things that I meant to mention about what's been happening since we got back. I don't know whether you might have seen, certainly in my little photo, my profile photo, you might have seen that I have a little dog, a medium-sized dog. She's a lurcher. She's a quarter greyhound, half soft-coated Wheaten Terrier, and a quarter standard poodle. And she's a very, very gentle dog, also a very, very intelligent dog. And she's normally pretty much always by my side. She's not here today. She's almost always with me when we're walking. It's not possible for her to do the Camino, sadly, because she's she's approaching 13 years old. Sometimes people still think she's a young dog. She can be very puppy-like at times. However, when we got back, she had a lump on her leg, which had previously been tested, and it was just fatty tissue. But it had got a lot bigger. It was the size of a golf ball, and she's only got thin little legs. So she had to have an operation a couple of days ago to have that removed, and they've been doing skin tests as well. So that's why I don't have my dog with me today, because she's got lots of stitches and she can't really do a walk. So I've left her at home, and we've got people there as well, so that we live with. My daughter's there at the moment, and my parents too. So we're now heading back to the Saracen's Head, and we're going to meet up with them. We're seeing these large dragonflies, and two of them mating just went past. And we were just talking about how it's quite a fierce method they have of mating, that the male puts his kind of claws into, well, they're not really claws, are they, but pincers into the female's head. It's an example of the male of the species being more deadly than the female, I suppose. She lives on though, so maybe it's not so bad. Anyway, I digress. We have coming up a lonely kayaker. I'm going to break off and just show you. It is in fact a paddleboard. Maybe not so lonely, texting. So one of the things that I was going to talk about that's been important for me with the Camino last year and also this year when we went back, but in a different way. And just going through a tunnel. I know it's a slightly difficult thing to talk about in a way because everybody's had their own experience, and I have a great amount of understanding for everyone. But basically, during COVID, I actually found Spain last year made me feel more comfortable. I felt safer there and more at ease than I did here, I think, because it boils down to politics, but because of the uncertainty here, basically, and the way things have been handled, but also because my own situation is that I live with somebody who's in an extremely vulnerable category, but really, really is, and still is to some extent. So for me, I've found that for me, masks work. I know there's disagreement about that. Hi. Different people have different views of that, but basically we were using FFP3 top quality N99, if you like, if you're in America, masks, and wore those on the plane, wore those on public transport, which you had to anyway in Spain. And that's what we've been doing in the UK until recently, when everything has completely opened up. So it's been quite difficult to judge, and in Spain, because I think everybody was following that more closely, it was easier, but also because we weren't staying in albergues, but in private rooms instead. So now I'm finding that quite difficult because we're having to judge everything here as a family. And I think if I were to go back and go into albergues, it might in some way be helpful because it would get me over the hell of it in a way, because I'd be around other people in a way that I haven't been for a while. So that's on my mind as well. We've got another probably vintage plane going over. It's got a propeller at the front. Wouldn't like to, it looks a bit like a Spitfire or something. I'm not going to be able to show you. Imagine the silhouette of a Spitfire or something similar. But yeah, my writing project at the moment is something I got government funding for. And I've written a lot of it, but I keep wanting to say more about it and feel like I can dig deeper into it. It was basically lottery funding and government funding because I've written a lot, particularly poetry in the past, but this is developing it out into prose more specifically, which in some ways I find it's a more flexible way to write because you can speak naturally. You might have gathered I like to try and speak naturally. It's a little house there on the left. They have some lovely courgettes and marrows out, and you can just leave a little donation and take what you want. So we've just done that. I now have a very fine courgette in my backpack. The little Fiesta just leaving us there is my family. We just had a nice stop at the Saracen's Head with them. In case it isn't obvious, it's now much less windy than it was earlier. Not that it was windy before, but there was a breeze. And it is hot. For the UK in particular, it's hot. Particularly the north of the UK, because we're in the northwest of England. It's also sort of quite a humid heat in a way. I suppose more so because we're near to the coast. Well, we could follow that public footpath, or a public footpath, as I nearly said, public footpath up there, but we're not going to. Well, it is quite a nice walk round that way. Instead, we're going to go up there, and then after that bend, almost immediately turn right. But first of all, I'm going to sit here and eat this apple pie. I am, yes. This is Gauze Hill. It's sort of the second hill over before the flatland that goes down to the coast. And this used to be common ground when I was little. I did record a video when I was preparing for the Camino and just checking the microphone and so on. Maybe I'll put it up at some point, so if I do, you may have already heard of this, or you may hear about it again. But it was very different to this when I was little, because in some ways it was more accessible, although this still is. It was wild, but it's historically been common ground. If you look at some of the old maps going way back to, you've got the first Ordnance Survey maps, which were, I think it's 1839, I think is the first. Something like that. 1856, I think there's one. And then 1898. And you can see there's a triangular area here, which is common ground. Oh, there's a group out for a walk. But now, I think they're trying to rewild it. But part of that is by letting a lot of it become very overgrown, so it's completely impenetrable. Looking down there, the tree, it's an oak tree there, that one. It's particularly fine for climbing. My daughter used to climb it all the time when she was really little. She did fall out of it from quite low down once. But yeah, we used to come here a lot. This stone has relevance to my Camino because I often used to come here and just sit. It seems to be a sort of perfect seat-shaped stone. And I found a stone here. It was around about here. Which is the one that I took to the Cruz de Ferro. It was quite a chunky stone, really, and carried it all the way there. And it was partly because, for me, this is a place that I've been visiting since I was really little, and it's a place that's always been accessible to me. And when it's not summer, you can see right out to the coast from here. So it's been a place of happiness a lot of the time, thoughtfulness, and sometimes uncertainty. It's quite dear to me, really. It feels that although it's not right on the doorstep of my home, it's not far off. All the vapour trails in the sky. I think a lot of that has to do with the air show today. There are always some, of course, but not that many. And just about 10 years ago, this area, particularly on the right, on the left a little as well, was low grass. We used to come here and fly kites. Again, now it's wonderful in that it's a meadow. But it was one of the few places, other than very manicured parks, little parks like the village green. Or we could come and run around a bit with the dog, and I don't know. I think we need to rewild many, many places, but I'm not convinced that just letting grass grow quite like this in one of the few places that we had access to is really ideal. I feel it as a bit of a loss. But that's just me. And I'm not involved in what they're doing. So I did used to go and see them for a while, because they have a centre for the nature reserve a little further round. And I was involved in one of their small mammal surveys a few years ago, and also they granted me access for a short period. Hello. When I was doing metal detecting. There's a field further on that they own. Organic eggs, £1.80. Free range, little box. It's just down. Can you see my finger? Just down there.